Hey everyone, I'm going to demonstrate to you how to release your hip flexors using the Franklin balls. Now, a lot of my patients come to me with hip flexor tightness, and their immediate response is, I need to stretch out my hip flexors. But in this video, I'm going to talk about why it's important to instead release your hip flexors using a massage ball instead of stretching them. So, why do we have hip flexor tightness? So, there has to be a cause for this. Now, one of the reasons this may be happening is because your glutes are tight. And when your glutes are tight, which are located in the back of your pelvis, it can shove forward your femoral head, which is the front of the hip bone. So if your glutes are tight, these are your glutes. This is your hip bone into the socket, and these are your hip flexors. If your glutes are tight, it's going to squeeze and shove your femoral head forward into the hip flexors, and the hip flexors aren't going to like that. So they're going to tighten up and try to shove your femoral head back into the socket. So the femoral head isn't actually moving in and out of the socket, but the femoral head is trying to manage all of this tension coming from the back of the pelvis and then the front of the pelvis. So again, the back of the pelvis being the glutes, the front of the pelvis being your hip flexors. So if you are just stretching your hip flexors without addressing maybe the root cause of the issue, you're always going to be struggling with hip flexor tightness or tension. So releasing out the glutes can be really helpful to ease hip flexor tightness. Now I'm going to do a separate video, or I'll link the video above regarding how to release your glutes using a Franklin ball, but for the purposes of this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to release the hip flexors. So now we're going to go over how to release your hip flexors. So you're going to take one of these Franklin balls and you're going to lay on your stomach. You are simply going to find your pelvic bone. So your pelvic bone is this knob right in the front of your pelvis, and your hip flexor is located inside of that pelvic bone. So these two knobs here you'll feel very easily on both sides. Again, you're just going to take that knob, roll your fingers inside of that pelvic bone, and you're going to put that Franklin ball right here. So we're going to lay onto our stomach, and I'm going to place that Franklin ball inside of my pelvic bone. And I'm simply going to lay rest my body down. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to breathe in and out of that Franklin ball. So I'll have you inhale. Imagine your belly expanding into the ball, and then you'll exhale. Let the ball melt or dig into your hip flexor. Inhale again. Exhale, let it go. Inhale. And exhale. Now you're going to do this for about 2 to 3 minutes. Every time you inhale, you should feel your belly expanding into the ball. And every time you exhale, the ball kind of digs or just sits deeper into your hip flexors. Now you're using your breath to help release the hip flexors because your diaphragm is fascially connected to your hip flexor, specifically your psoas major. So everything is connected. So I find it really helpful using your breath to lengthen, hydrate, and release your hip flexors. Great. So let's say you just did that for 2 or 3 minutes, and then what you'll do is you'll do that on the other side. So give that a try. Again, this is really helpful if you are struggling with hip flexor tightness or a lot of tension in the front of your hips. Also a really great tool if you are struggling with constipation, because your colon sits right in front of your hip flexor. So if your hip flexors are tight, it could be kind of putting some compression or pressure on your colon, impacting colon motility. So give that a try and let me know what you think. If you have any questions, please leave a comment below.